order this meeting of the Courthouse Square Historic Preservation Commission for the month of February 2021. And could I hear, please, a motion to approve our agenda, which is before you?
So moved.
Amanda makes a motion. Do I have a second from Andy? Thank you. All in favor of approving the agenda as drawn, say aye.
Aye.
Hello, Donna.
Hey there.
We see you on the screen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see anybody. Is that normal?
I don't know.
Will you ask her what she sees?
What do you see?
Well, I see a big blue circle, and I see me over in the corner.
Okay.
Hey, Donna, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Hey, if you can click on participants, maybe 3 dots, and then click on participants, you should see a participant named Chris Simmons, and you should be able to pin him. And that is the, you'll be able to see the camera in the courtroom.
Well, I did pin him, but nothing's happened. I don't really need to see. I've got my computer here. I can just listen.
Very good.
Okay, thanks, Donna. Our agenda is approved, and you all have received a copy of the minutes from our November meeting, which must be the last meeting that we had. And do I hear a motion for approval of those minutes?
I'll motion to approve.
Stuart motions.
Second.
And Lee seconds that. All in favor of approving the November minutes, say aye.
Aye.
The November minutes are approved. And I will just direct your attention to administrative approvals. Our staff has already granted approvals for 3 cases, which all 3 were signs. And then we have 2 COAs tonight. First, we will hear from Griffin or Corey, maybe, about Harrison Yard. Kate, do you want to discuss this case before?
Just do the staff recommendation.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, our first case tonight is case number 354 regarding the lot at 1210 Harrison Avenue. It's directly connected to Harrison's Bar. The applicant requests approval to install accessory structures that will be part of the previously approved outdoor dining and recreational venue in that vacant lot. The requests tonight include some tents that will be there permanently, fire pits, a TV wall, and a boxwood wall. As staff has stated in prior reports related to this proposed outdoor dining area, we do not believe that the concept negatively affects the existing resources in the Courthouse Square district or the character and feeling of the district. The new bar is topographically much lower than the primary buildings on the square and the square itself. And while the items will be visible, they're not going to be a permanent change in the historic district. All of the items are removable if something wanted to be built on the lot. So staff recommended approval of the COA as proposed. Corey, do you want to?
I'm just here representing.
Okay. Thank you, Corey. Does anybody have questions for either Kate or Corey about Harrison Yard?
Move we approve.
We have a motion to approve the COA.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor of approving COA? Wait, I'm sorry, first, do we have any discussion of the motion? All in favor of approving the COA, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Including Donna, and the motion passes. And I did not think to mention that Griffin left because he is the owner and a commissioner, and so he can come back. Griffin, great, thank you. Our next COA, number 355, presented by Dr. Whitaker for his new restaurant. And Kate will make staff comments on this COA.
So there's a proposed pizza restaurant going into the former Pita Pit location at 319 North Lamar Boulevard. The ventilation wasn't adequate for the proposed new restaurant, and they're proposing a new exhaust duct. It's going to be camouflaged within an existing soffit on the building, as you guys probably saw in the photos. There'll be a grate out onto the brick outer wall. Virginia Lukenbach is here if anyone has questions about the drawings that you guys received, and staff did recommend approval of the COA as proposed.
Thank you, Kate. Does anybody have any questions of Virginia about this soffit?
I move we approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Andy and a second from Stuart for approval. Any discussion on this COA? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Griffin. Any discussion? And all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Good luck to you in your new restaurant venture. It's approved. All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Okay, do we have anything from staff about previous things that we discussed? Like maybe what we discussed in November about emergency demo?
Can you hear me okay? Great. So in November, seems like it was 10 minutes ago, it also seems like it was 2 years ago. The conversation that we were having was for staff to take a look at what we could do to, I think, better protect the commission and the city in the instances where we have demolitions or emergency demolitions, and maybe a duration of time, an extended duration of time goes by before anything's constructed, or perhaps nothing's constructed at all. So how can we address that? And we've continued to have conversations about it. In most instances, we think it would be ideal if we actually have plans that come before the commission to be able to be considered. However, there's no guarantee that even that would be constructed, right? I think that there's a risk when the commission grants a demolition that, and we've seen this in even in the other historic district where somebody received approval with plans and those plans were actually never constructed. So as we continue to think about how we would policy around that, it might make sense to, even in the instance of an emergency demolition, require, and this may be just good for all demolitions, require a landscaping plan to be required, and then that would also have to take into consideration, any potential dirt work or things like that that might be required in order to get that site at a point to where a landscaping plan could be implemented. So you would have a landscaping plan that would be presented, and then we could require a bond for the purposes of that work to be provided prior to staff signing off on the demolition permit for from the building department.
Okay, so both a landscape plan and some money to implement that plan before even emergency demolition is granted.
Yeah, I think it could be I think that the emergency, let's assume that they provide us with the landscaping plan. I think that the condition of approval would be that the bond would have to be provided prior to the issuance of the demolition permit. Does that make sense? So they may not come to the meeting with the bond in hand, but that would just be a condition of approval, and staff would not sign off on that, on the demolition permit from being issued.
So in the case of 208, with the timing for how fast that happened, would that have taken care of that problem? Yes?
Well, I think it could, but I think that they have time to be able to, their COA is good, valid for a year. So
What she's asking was that step implemented? Chris, the building department still has to sign off on a demo permit even in an emergency situation. So that step wouldn't have
have been missed.
So, and along with that, I think, to your point, would it have solved that problem? I don't know that it would have solved that problem because their COA is still valid, so they could wait until month 11 to begin that work. So,
Oh, right.
right, so, but what we would have is an assurance that, the city would have an assurance that should they not pursue moving forward with those plans, that it's not indefinitely going to sit in that state. We would have the ability to call that bond for the purposes of having landscaping being installed, whether that's just grass, putting in some dirt and having it grass.
So of course, you still have a year to do something.
Right.
It would just keep us from having something like Uncommon Oxford, which I think was almost 3 years with an upturned Bobcat.
Right.
Okay, so it would prevent that.
Yeah.
I would, just a couple points on it.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 year seems like a long time, but, in the grand scheme of things, I wouldn't have a problem with it being still, within that term of the active COA at 11 months and 28 days. That's when you can call the bond. I would suggest that it should be thought of as a stabilization and restoration plan, not just a landscape plan. Because like in the case of 208, we've got exposed, unfinished walls around it that I think should also be a part of the plan that they need to submit, which may just be paint, but something to stabilize it and to make it, for lack of a better word, prettier than what it is now. So I think it should be greater than just a landscape plan. Mm-hmm. And to that point, they need those plans in order to formulate the bond, right? Like to come up with a number, they need to submit those plans. So that would be something that, like I would have a client that says, well, why do we have to do that? We're gonna build it. And it's like, well, because you gotta come up with a number for the bond. So you've gotta have the plans, but it needs to include more than just landscape, I think.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page, what we call it, absolutely, yeah. And then the scope of what would be encapsulated within that, we'll have to define it. The caveat here is if you've got licensed professionals saying that this building needs to come down and it's a threat to the welfare of the public, and they don't have that stabilization plan, whatever we call it, in place, I think that there's I don't know that there's liability there, but I mean there's certainly, we need to make sure that we know that we may be causing an issue trying to get that plan in order for it to be considered for that demolition. I don't know that that makes sense, but that's my concern, is thinking through on the other side that if we have somebody that's telling us this building needs to come down because there's an issue and it needs to come down today, and yet it's going to take 2-3 weeks to get this stabilization plan. I don't know that it would take that long, but if there's going to be some time, it won't. It should be something that could be quick. But that's the flip side of the concern. It's about the only mud that I could get to stick on the wall.
Well, it could be something where planning staff comes up with a number.
Uh-huh.
If it's that big of a deal, and your number is, probably bigger than what it would actually be, and you can say, hey, well, you can come back to us with a plan, and we can whittle that down. To me, that seems reasonable.
It's solvable. It's just something to be aware of that, that could delay the situation. Hopefully, we don't run into this situation again. So, but we're trying to think through the gap stops for the future. So,
well, first, how does the ordinance read now? What is required to obtain a demolition?
So,
seems like I remember this plan involved.
Yeah, ordinarily you would have to provide provide plans for construction, or in a commercial property you could actually provide a landscaping plan. But in emergency demolitions, it's not really as clear as to what should or ought to be provided. And I think it sounds to me like that is what, I think that was actually one of the very first instances that we've had to deal with somebody coming before us in an emergency demolition. We had a building that's collapsed, but we've never had a request like that. So we're kind of learning from, those scenarios as they've come through, and how we could better ourselves and ensure that, a building doesn't sit in a state of disarray over a period of time.
And that COA was issued when?
the emergency demolition
Right.
in February.
In February, okay. And there's been nothing presented to the city since then?
So they came before y'all for a complimentary review, and that was probably, yeah,
Since then,
fall.
nothing else has come back?
Yes, so we've had follow-up conversation with the property owner. We did see an alternative concept. They were still fleshing that out, and they had not yet felt like they were ready to move forward with coming before the commission for consideration. They're still tweaking it. They're still considering the original, but they did receive quite a bit of feedback, and so they're trying to process through all that and how they can adjust the building and make sure that, you know, something that they would be pleased with, is functional for them, and it's also something that the commission and the city would be proud of as well.
Is there a backstop to that demolition, a drop dead when they get to do something?
I think that that's part of the issue is no, there's not.
Not, okay.
Yeah, in those emergency situations.
So the emergency demolition happened a year ago?
Yeah. The approval was last February,
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
but they didn't.
and then hit the
They
pandemic.
took it down pretty quickly.
They did.
Again, it was forever ago, and it just happened.
It just happened, that's right.
So, okay.
COVID time.
That's
Yeah,
right.
good time.
Yeah, before the pandemic, guys.
So if that's something that sounds reasonable to the commission, we can start to flesh that out in actual language and see what it looks like on paper. I think it's pretty reasonable. I mean, to be honest with you, we do want to check with legal and just make sure that all our i's and t's are crossed and dotted.
Okay.
But I don't really foresee there being an issue with that. It'd be similar to a site restoration bond that we have in place right now for other development, so.
Are you confident they're gonna come back with a plan, or is it something you think they're gonna sell off?
I think they're actively working. I mean, we just saw a new concept within a week or 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, and that's a new design. I mean, if that weren't the case, they wouldn't be working with an architect. So, in the meantime, the screening around the fence, since our last meeting, the screening has been put in place around the fence. We've the walkway has been removed, and I think it's important for the commission to realize why that walkway was put in place, because at the time when we were having this conversation nearly a year ago, it was, you know, there's that walkway that comes from from Square Books, and as it moves towards the south, you know, there's a pretty substantial elevation change, and then there's the steps and then the ramp that's there. And so the plan was, one of the very first things that they would do is, as part of the demolition, take out all of that sidewalk and redo it, so that way there's no longer a need for stairs and the ramp, do that all at one time. And so that's why that walkway was put in there, because that demolition was supposed to take place, and then with COVID and everything hitting, it just kind of hit the pause button. So that work will take place again when they decide to build something new, to the sidewalk there. But just at this time, we've asked them to remove that until the work does take
Thank you,
place.
Ben.
So conceivably, that lot could lay unconstructed indefinitely, based on our ordinance as drawn.
That's depressing.
I mean, let's figure it's a matter of time till the board gets some pressure, board above us. And I've gotten a couple calls, I'm sure y'all have as well, what's going on,
Yeah.
just curious. So, I mean, indefinitely, they can keep it open.
We may have some provisions inside the municipal code that we might be able to work through, but there's nothing within the historic preservation code that would say you have to put it back, you have to restore it.
Okay. Are you good with our feedback then about this?
I think so.
To go forward?
Yeah, I think so. I think we could have something for you next month to consider, and then and then once we do that, we would take it to ordinance review. Once you feel comfortable with it, us moving forward, we would take it to ordinance review committee, and we would get the aldermen, and we have a couple planning commissioners that would be on that, and then we would take it to the board for full consideration.
Okay, thank you. Speaking of things that have taken a year, I think the COA has lapsed for the parking lot next to the garage. Am I right?
So I'll have to check, but I think that they did have a land disturbance permit. Yeah, this would be the hotel on the north side of Jefferson, right? So I think they had a permit, a construction permit, land disturbance permit. I don't know the status of that, but that's something that we can take a look at.
Across the street from Lawrence? No.
Next to it. Well, where it is. Moving LaRousse. Sorry, I'm joking.
You're saying across the street, right?
The hotel is on LaRousse, but this commission deals with the parking lot for the hotel.
Right.
Which
I'm
is,
sorry.
which
In
was a
conjunction.
COA to move LaRousse and construct a parking lot there. And my memory served me that June it was up for a year.
You're probably remembering correctly, and I was thinking in terms of the lot that's on the north side, you know, on the Oxford Floral side, I think they had a land disturbance permit, construction permit, they had installed some infrastructure already, but I think that was some time ago. So I can check on that, but I don't think that they had a permit of any kind for the parking lot where LaRousse is at all.
Yeah,
So,
they just had a COA which has
Right.
expired.
right,
So I guess they would have to ask us again.
correct.
Okay.
If they had a permit with the COA expiring, I think that they can continue to construct, but I don't think that they have a permit for the parking lot. They did at one point, whether it's valid or not, for the actual hotel. That's something we'll look into.
Okay, I just know that our COA required them to have started construction of the hotel before they were allowed to move the house.
Right.
Okay. All right, anything else for staff? Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. We'll see you in